Welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name is the Keeper of Dreams. I am your guide in the space between night and morning, between a thought and a dream. Today, I invite you to one of these places, a place where the night is not a fleeting darkness, but a long, deep breath, a world that has learned to speak softly to silence itself. Are you ready? Then make yourself comfortable. Take a deep breath and exhale, and look out the window of our ship of thoughts. Today we will make a stop in one of those places that are not marked on the star maps. They can be found only by the faint vibration of peace emanating from the planet itself. Places where time slows down to give rest to a tired soul. Get ready, we're on our way aboard. Our destination, the planet of Eyrem, a world that has learned the art of waiting for sleep. Listen to the soft hum of the engines, and let's get started. Architects of Silence. Chapter 1. Arrival at the planet of the long night. The somnambulous ship emerged from the FTL jump with a soft sigh, not with a rumble and a shake, but with a feeling as if the universe around it had gently exhaled. Beyond the porthole hung the planet of Eyrem, not a bright marble, but a matte ball in deep, velvety tones of indigo and gray. The streaks of clouds moved lazily, like the thoughts of a sleeping giant. Lyra Vane, a galactic anthropologist with dark circles under her eyes that no cream could take, pressed her forehead against the cool glass. The hum of the engines was still in her ears, throbbing in her temples. Insomnia had been her uninvited companion for the past 3 years, faithful as a shadow. She came here not only on behalf of the Institute of Xenocultures, she had come in a desperate last-ditch hope, the Eyrem. The catalogs include the world of regulated sleep, colloquially, a planet where night is a profession. Due to the unique tilt of the axis and the slow rotation, the period of solar illumination was replaced by 72 hours of almost total darkness. The first colonists, who were not genetically adapted, faced not a lack of resources, but a quiet epidemic, a collapse of the psyche due to chronic lack of sleep. Civilization could have perished, dissolved into paranoia and hallucinations. But she survived. She survived by developing discipline, not technology. An entire culture built around one sacred act, the art of falling asleep. Lyra snorted after downloading the preliminary reports. A set of archaic rituals and superstitions, she thought, looking at the diagrams of cocoons in descriptions of dances of fatigue. Perhaps effective as a placebo for a primitive society. Her own dream, if its occasional flashes could be called that, was a battlefield. A battle she lost every night. She believed in data, in neurostimulators, in strict hygiene protocols, not in talking shadows by the campfire. The shuttle took her to the settlement of Silence, located in a wide, gentle valley between two sleeping mountain ranges. The air she breathed in when she came out was cold, crystal clear, and quiet. Not in the sense of the absence of sound, but in the sense of its quality. There was no background hum of man-made civilization here. Some low, silvery grass rustled. Water was gurgling somewhere. And this silence did not oppress, but enveloped her like a cool sheet. She was greeted by Guardian Elian, a man in his 60s with a face pitted not with lines of fatigue, but with thin, radiant lines like a map of rivers at dawn. His eyes were calm, attentive, but without the feverish gleam that Lyra saw in the mirror. Dr. Wayne, welcome to Twilight. His voice was low and steady, like a jet of deep water. We start at sunset. You have 2 hours to leave the day's business. Then they will only get in the way. Lyra was counting on a lecture, on a demonstration of holographic circuits. Instead, she was given simple clothes made of soft, breathable linen and escorted to an extensive, warm workshop. There, Elian's entire extended family, about 15 people, from elders to teenagers, were engaged in manual labor. One was weaving on an old-fashioned loom, tapping his bird rhythmically. 2 of them were grinding grain in stone millstones, The movement of their hands was cyclical and unhurried. Someone made pots out of clay, not striving for perfection of form, but enjoying the very plasticity of the material. The first 10 o'clock in the morning is the time for the body, explained Elian's daughter Myra, pointing to the potter's wheel. A restless mind lives in tense muscles. We don't exhaust ourselves to the point of exhaustion. We give the body work, monotonous, rhythmic, requiring minimal brain attention. We tire the nervous system through movement so that it doesn't have to worry. Lyra, raising an eyebrow skeptically, sat down at an empty machine. They showed her the simplest algorithm. Pick up the thread, skip the shuttle, nail the ducks. 1, 2, 3. At first, her thoughts were racing. This is primitive. What a waste of time. My reports, colonist neural scans. But after 20 minutes, the rhythm began to take over. Bird's knock became a metronome. The movements became automatic. She felt warmth radiating from her working shoulders and forearms, and a mild tiredness filled her muscles. It was not the exhaustion of a marathon runner, but a pleasant heaviness after a long, quiet walk. And her internal dialogue, that never-ending committee of criticism and planning, began to subside. He seemed bored. Lyra realized with surprise that for several minutes she hadn't thought about anything except the movement of the shuttle from her right hand to her left and back. There was no anxiety throbbing in her temples, but a steady, slow warmth. When the big hourglass in the corner of the workshop counted down the time, the activity stopped by itself. Everyone silently put away their tools and headed to the central hall, where a low fire was already burning in the hearth. Lyra was also offered a seat. Waiting for some mystical action to begin, she tensed up. But something else has begun. The eldest of the family, a grandfather named Orson, started first. His voice was emotionless, flat, as if he was reading out a shopping list. Today I was thinking about the cracked beam in the east barn. I was afraid that the repairs would take time away from the preparation for sewing. I also remembered a conversation with my son a year ago, where I was too harsh, and I felt a slight concern about Myra's health. She sneezed twice in the morning. He said that and fell silent. No one commented, comforted, or gave advice. He just nodded. Then Myra spoke, then her brother, then the children. They laid out their shadows, minor annoyances, unresolved tasks, fleeting fears, without analyzing, without making excuses, just stating the fact of their existence in your day. When Lyra's turn came, she felt a spasm of resistance inside. Flaunt your weakness? Talk about how she's afraid of failing the mission? How does he stare at the ceiling every night, feeling time turn into sticky, viscous resin? How envious of these people sleeping around. Her voice sounded hoarse. I haven't slept more than 3 hours in a row for the last 3 years. I'm afraid my mind will fail. I'm angry at my helplessness. And I'm afraid that everything you do is just theater, and it won't help me. She blurted it out and squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for judgment or sweet consolation. Instead, there was a quiet, accepting pause in the audience. Then Elian said, "Thank you for sharing your shadow. She's here with us now, not just in you." Then he picked up his piece of paper, on which he had scribbled something for some reason during the conversation, and threw it into the fire. Everyone did the same thing. Following Lyra's example, she crumpled up the blank sheet given to her and threw it into the flames. She watched the edges of the paper turn black, curl, and turn to ash. An irrational, almost childish feeling of lightness touched her. Nothing has changed. The problems have not disappeared, but their sharp, prickly importance seemed to have diminished. They were dragged out, called by name, and they became just facts, not demons gnawing from the inside. The next period, cocoon time, impressed Lyra with its scrupulous, almost scientific pragmatism. It wasn't a cozy blanket wrap. It was environmental engineering. Each family member went to his own personal sleep capsule, a small, perfectly dark and soundproof room. But the main thing was not the interior, but the preparation process. Lyra was watching Myra. She was sorting through several blankets of different densities and weights, draping them over her arm in turn, closing her eyes and focusing on the sensations. She chose not the warmest and not the lightest, but the one whose heaviness caused her to feel the deepest muscular relaxation. Pressure on the body is a feedback loop for the nervous system, she explained quietly to Lyra. It tells the body, you're safe, you're covered, you can let go of control. Then the pillows. They weren't just whipped up. They were filled with a mixture of dried aromatic herbs, selected not for a strong smell, but for a light, barely perceptible rustle with every movement of the head. This sound, Myra explained, was the key. Monotonous, predictable. It drowned out the random noises of his own body in the outside world, becoming a sonic safety label. Sleep is not a loss of consciousness, Elian said, helping Lyra prepare her temporary place. This is an immersion in trust. The world, the body, the mind. Everything should feel that it is possible to let go of vigilance. We don't force sleep to come. We're just preparing a place for him so perfectly that his absence becomes absurd. Lyra, following the instructions, picked up a blanket for herself, then the second one, and the third. None of them seemed right. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too light. She felt a growing panic. Everyone around her was already sinking into their cocoons. The process was going on like a fine-tuned mechanism, and she, a scientist with implants in her brain, could not choose a blanket. The last thing she tried was a quilted sheep's wool blanket, heavy, almost oppressive, and at the moment when his weight fell on her shoulders, she involuntarily exhaled with such relief that it surprised her. Her body, without asking permission from her overloaded brain, responded to this weight as a signal. Stop. Security has been lifted. The first 2 days of the Eyrem night passed for Lyra in a haze of unusual but deep relaxation. She didn't sleep for 8 hours at a time, like they did, but she dozed fitfully, and it was more than she had allowed herself in recent months. However, at the peak of the third deepest and darkest hours, when the settlement was plunged into silence, the past overtook her. The wall of silence collapsed. The hum of non-existent engines sounded in my ears again. My heart began to pound rapidly. My thoughts raced like a cavalry charge. You're here for nothing. Your data will be ridiculed. You'll never be cured. They're all asleep, and you're a broken mechanism that can't perform a basic function. A cold sweat broke out on his back. The heavy, previously comforting blanket now seemed like a shroud. She gasped. With a sharp animal clarity, she realized that all the rituals, all this beautiful archaeology of sleep, were just decorations. The real insomnia, her insomnia, lived deeper. She was stronger. In a panic, trembling, she slipped out of the cocoon and went barefoot into the common room, lit only by the smoldering coals in the hearth. She was sure she was alone, but Elian was sitting in a chair by the dying fire. He wasn't sleeping. He just sat there, and his face in the glow of the coals expressed not wakefulness, but a state of deep, alert peace. Can't sleep? Lyra said sardonically, with a break in her voice, feeling like a child caught in the act of a crime. Sometimes a shadow requires extra attention, he replied calmly. This is not a defeat. It's part of the way. He did not invite her to return to the cocoon. He didn't talk about breathing. He got up, went to the pantry, and took out a small canvas bag. He untied it. A multicolored river spilled onto the table between them. Hundreds, thousands of lentil seeds mixed together. Green, brown, yellow, orange. Help me, Elian said, placing 4 empty bowls in front of her. The green ones are here. The browns are here. The yellow ones go there. The orange ones are right here. Lyra stared at him, thinking it was a joke. What? Sorting. Just look at the grains. Take one at a time. Put it in the right bowl. It was crazy. A primitive, meaningless job for an android. Through her rage and despair, Lyra wanted to refuse. But there was nothing else to do. Everything inside her screamed, and this idiotic task seemed like at least some kind of anchor. Angrily, she poked her fingers into the pile, grabbed a handful and began, barely discerning the colors in the semi-darkness. One grain, green, into the bowl. Second, brown. The other one, the third, green again. For the first 5 minutes, her thoughts were raging. It's humiliating. It's stupid. I'm a scientist. He's manipulating me. But the hands kept moving, grain by grain. The movement was thrilling. It was extremely simple. It did not require decisions, plans, or assessments. Only sensory discrimination, color, shape. After about 10 minutes, her breathing, by itself, without any techniques, began to even out. The rage was gone, replaced by a dull, automatic action. The mental whirlwind slowed down. He had nothing to graze on. There were no complicated problems, just simple sorting. Consciousness, deprived of the usual fuel of anxiety and introspection, began to shut down. My eyelids felt heavy. The movements of the fingers slowed down, became smoother, almost gentle. She didn't notice when Elian quietly draped that heaviest wool blanket over her shoulders. She did not realize the moment when her head bent down and her hands stopped searching for grains. Lyra Vane, the galactic anthropologist, fell asleep. Not in a perfectly prepared cocoon, and sitting at the table, in the middle of scattered lentils, in the rays of the fading light of the hearth. I fell asleep deeply, dreamlessly, letting go of control completely and irrevocably for the first time in 3 years. She woke up to the touch of a warm ray of sunlight on her cheek. 72 o'clock in the morning is over. The settlement was waking up, but not fussily, but gradually like a blooming flower. Lyra found herself on a cot next to the hearth, covered with a blanket. Bowls of neatly sorted lentils were on the table. The world seemed incredibly clear, bright, and light. In her head, there was not the usual leaden haze of lack of sleep, but a clear, ringing silence. She didn't feel rested. That was too strong a word. She felt whole. Elian handed her a cup of warm herbal tea. They stared in silence at the first rays of light making their way into the valley. "Do you understand?" "What is it?" he finally asked. Lyra nodded. She understood everything. "You don't struggle with insomnia," she said softly. "You're serving her. You treat anxiety not as an enemy that needs to be defeated, but as a naughty but your child who cannot be kicked out into the dark night. He needs to be tired. Keep busy with monotonous work. Give him a task so simple that it becomes boring even to panic." Elian smiled. "We create such ideal conditions for sleeping that staying awake in them becomes a pointless effort. And if the mind still resists, we give it a hand job. The body will tire the mind better than any thought." Lyra stared at her hands. Yesterday they were sorting the lentils. They will be recording a report today. But now she knew that in her luggage on the Somnambula, she would take away more than just a report on ethnographic practices. She will take away the new protocol, not for the brain, but for the hands. Not to fight, but to tire. The art of falling asleep turned out to be not magic, but the highest form of practical self-compassion. It was not about making silence come, but about preparing so perfectly for its arrival that there was simply no room for noise. The spaceship took her back to the starry darkness. But now in his cargo hold, among the scientific equipment, there was a small bag of colorful lentils. And Lyra Vane knew that the next sleepless night, wherever she found her, she would have a plan. Simple, pointless, and trouble-free. She will take out 4 bowls, and she will sort it out, grain by grain, until silence sits next to her, throws an invisible heavy blanket over her shoulders, and takes her with him to warm, dark, serene depths, where they finally stop thinking and just eat. The taste of the herbal infusion was subtle, a hint of chamomile, a hint of something earthy and soothing. Sipping it, Lyra watched the settlement come to life. There was no rush, no loud conversations. People moved with purposeful slowness, exchanging quiet smiles or light touches on the shoulder. A boy was watering the silvery grass outside, the drops catching the morning light like scattered diamonds. The elder was sitting on a stone bench, just facing the sun with his eyes closed, soaking up the warmth. It wasn't just the end of the night. It was a smooth transition into a day that would prepare itself for the next long darkness. Rhythm was everything here. Lyra felt an unusual pang, not of anxiety, but of deep, melancholic longing. Longing for a rhythm she had never known. For years, her life had been a series of rough edges. Deadlines, insomnia, artificial light, stimulants. Here, time was a circle, not a broken line. She finished the infusion, and warmth spread through her chest. Elian broke the comfortable silence. Is a smart servant, but a terrible master, he said, his gaze still fixed on the valley. He considers it his job to decide, anticipate, and control. Especially in the dark, when his eyes can't see, he tries to compensate by thinking even harder. It's like a watchman shining a flashlight in all directions, desperately looking for threats. But there are no threats in the dark, just rest. Therefore, we must gently take the lantern from the watchman's hands and turn it off, not by force, by persuasion. He turned to her. Your hands sorting the lentils? That was the moment you picked up the lantern. The watchman was so taken aback by a simple, repetitive task that he just handed it over. And the dream? The dream is the very darkness that was there all the time. Lyra nodded slowly. The metaphor resonated with physical certainty. Her own inner watchman had been on feverish, sleepless watch for years. Last night, for the first time, she gave him something pointless to do until he fell asleep on duty. She did not defeat him. She replaced him with compassion. It's about redirecting attention, she said, repeating her earlier insight, but feeling it more deeply now. Not about emptying the mind, which is impossible, but about filling it with something so non-threatening that the mind lets go. Before departure, Myra presented Lyra with a small hand-woven bag. For your lentils, she said with a smile. It was made of the same soft linen, its texture comforting under Lyra's fingers. A simple gift felt deeply meaningful. It was not a souvenir. It was a tool, a sign of practical philosophy. Lyra carefully packed it next to her dictaphone and data slates, a tangible piece of Eyrem among her sterile instruments. The drive back to the shuttle landing site was quiet. The path wound through a grove of pale, smooth-barked trees. The air was still cool, smelling of moist soil and something sweet she couldn't identify. She didn't speak, and Elian didn't feel the need to fill the silence. The silence here was not emptiness. It was a presence, a companion. She was what they cultivated. At the shuttle, Elian did not offer a handshake. Instead, he gently placed his palms on his chest and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect and farewell. The night is not your enemy, Dr. Wayne. It's a long, quiet harbor. Your ship just needed to remember how to drift. Lyra found herself mirroring the gesture, and a lump rose in her throat. She arrived for the data and left with a silent bow and a bag of lentils. It felt more valuable than any data set. The shuttle's ascent was smooth. As they climbed, the settlement of silence shrank into a tiny, peaceful cluster on the vast, rugged landscape of the Eyrem. From this height, the planet looked like a worn, comfortable cloak of blue and gray tones. Lyra pressed her palm against the cool porthole, silently thanking the world below. The shuttle docked with the Somnambula with a soft magnetic thud. The familiar hum of the starship's life support systems greeted her, but it sounded different now. It looks less like a machine, more like smooth mechanical breathing. Back in her austere quarters aboard the Somnambula, Lyra did not immediately sit down at her desk to begin her report. Instead, she stood in the center of the small room, feeling the artificial gravity and listening to the ever-present vibration of the ship. It was her own endless night. She opened her suitcase and took out a linen bag. She then took a standard food tray and 4 drinking glasses from the replicator. She sat on the floor, leaning back against the bed, and poured the multicolored lentils onto the smooth metal surface of the tray. The clinking sound was harsh in the sterile room. She hasn't started sorting yet. She just stared at them. Green, brown, yellow, orange. The chaos of color. She was thinking about the chaos in her head at 3 in the morning. Scattered thoughts, fragments of conversations, unresolved equations, personal regrets, all mixed up. She took a deep, slow breath, remembering the feel of the heavy blanket, the smell of the hearth, the sound of Myra's loom. She didn't try to force calm. She was just remembering him. Then she started, not with the feverish energy of last night, but with deliberate slowness. One grain, unresolved dispute with the director of the institute. Green, in the first glass. Other, alert about radiation levels in Sector G. Brown, the second one, the forgotten anniversary of her mother's death. Yellow. Her movements were ritualistic, meditative. She didn't solve these problems. She didn't even look at them. She simply acknowledged their existence and placed them, one by one, outside the vortex of her mind. She gave each worry a color and a container. The process took a long time. The pile on the tray was shrinking, grain by grain. Her breathing synchronized with her movements. Inhale as she picked up the seed. Exhale when you place it. When the last orange seed found its glass, Lyra's hands froze in her lap. The tray was empty. 4 glasses were filled with monochrome piles, a neat, orderly system born out of chaos. Deep fatigue washed over her, but it was the pure, heavy fatigue of the body after Elian's workshop, and not the fragile, nervous exhaustion of insomnia. She didn't fight it. She stood up, her joints stiff, and carefully placed the glasses on her table. They would stay there, she decided, until morning, a visual reminder that her thoughts were contained. She then ordered from the replicator the heaviest blanket available on the ship, a thick, thermal blanket used for emergency survival. It wasn't perfect, but it had weight. She changed into her sleep clothes, turned off all the lights except for one dim orientation glow on the floor, and lay down. She pulled the heavy blanket up to her chin, feeling its pressure pin her to the cot. In the dark, she didn't count backwards or visualize peaceful scenes. She was just replaying in her mind the feeling of lentils slipping through her fingers, the smooth, cool surface of each grain, a soft click as it hit the bottom of the ceramic cup. Over and over, like a mantra of the mundane. The dream did not come as a thief or a conqueror. It came like a slow, rising tide. She felt herself sinking into the mattress, the hum of the ship turning from sound to sensation, and then into nothing. There was no moment of falling asleep. She was conscious and then she was in another place. The next thing she realized was the gentle chime of the ship's morning cycle. She opened her eyes. She was asleep. Not a full, uninterrupted 8 hours, but a solid, deep 5 hours. It was more than she'd had overnight in years. She lay there for a while longer, feeling the absence of the usual sandpaper behind her eyes, the silence in her head. It was the silence of the Eyrem transplanted. With renewed clarity, she sat down at her desk to begin her official report. The headline she typed was not an anthropological analysis of Somnian rituals on Eyrem. These were field notes on the applied neurology of rest, the Eyrem protocol for cognitive deceleration. Her report did not begin with methodology, but with a personal note. The main tool for achieving somnia is not pharmacological or technological. He is metacognitive. The subject should be directed to observe his own anxiety as a separate process, a shadow, and then provided with a physically engaging, cognitively non-demanding task to which executive function can be transferred. This creates a neural exit from a hyper-excited state. She wrote for hours, translating the experiences of the loom, the circle by the fire, the cocoon, and the lentil into the dry language of science. But the basic truth was unscientific. It was kindness. Radical kindness to his own feverish mind. As the somnambulist raced through the void, Lyra often interrupted her work to look at the 4 glasses of sorted lentils on her table. They became her cairns, her markers. She no longer saw just legumes. She saw a structured representation of her own capacity for order. One evening, when she felt the first tingles of restless energy, she did not wait for them to intensify. She just poured the lentils back onto the tray and started again. This time it wasn't a crisis. It was a service. Planned adjustment of her psyche. She often thought about the people of Eyrem. Their struggle was existential, built into their very orbit. Their solution was not to conquer nature, but to adapt to it with deep grace. They didn't invent light to banish their long night. They learned to see in the dark, to see rest, not absence. Her insomnia, she realized, was her own personal long night, a psychological Eyrem, and she tried to fight it with the wrong weapons: light, noise, stimulation, control. The answer was surrender, not in surrender to defeat, but in surrender to the natural process. The surrender of the weight of the blanket, the rhythm of the task, the silence. The last leg of her journey home felt different. Space was no longer a cold, empty vacuum between points of interest. He was the very embodiment of the silence she had learned to cultivate. The endless night outside her window was no longer frightening. It was familiar, almost comforting. She was the same substance as sleep. She spent her last shift not watching the data, but sitting quietly with a cup of tea in her hands, watching the stars rush by. Not as destinations, but as distant, silent witnesses. She was preparing to return to her old life. She knew what the cacophony was waiting for. The hum of communicators, the flow of messages, bright lights, social demands. But she felt armed in a new way. In her luggage, next to the official badge and date slates, there was a linen bag, now a little frayed at the edges. It was her mascot, her plan. She has already identified 4 bowls that she will use in her apartment on Terra. Simple ceramic, heavy and durable. Somnambula began the braking sequence. Gentle forces gently pressed her to the chair. She closed her eyes, not out of fear or anxiety about the upcoming workload, but to savor the last moments of the journey. She thought about Elian's words about the harbor. Her ship, both a spaceship and a vessel of her own self, docked. But now he knew how to drift. He knew that after every swim, there was a quiet pier. You don't have to fight the waves to reach him. You just have to stop fighting and let the gentle current of fatigue carry you to him. The ship landed with a barely noticeable bump. The hum of the engines faded to a whisper, then to silence. The journey is over. But as she unbuckled her seatbelts, Lyra knew that another journey had just begun. Internal, quieter. She took a last deep breath of the recycled air of the ship, picked up her suitcase with lentils and headed for the airlock, to the noise and light, carrying her piece of quiet night inside her. And so, our own ship of thoughts completes its orbit. We have witnessed a world where darkness is not the end, but a spacious beginning. We have seen that the battle for sleep is often lost in the struggle itself. The key lies not in a stronger will, but in a softer attention. Attention that can be placed like one smooth stone in the palm of a simple task. Take a look at your own hands for a moment. Feel their weight on your lap. They are not just tools for action, they are bridges. Bridges from the rushing mind to the resting body. Tonight, if the old guardian of your thoughts starts his feverish patrol, you have a new option. You don't have to argue with him. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to silence him. You can, with great compassion, give him one simple, harmless thing to observe: the rise and fall of your own breath, the feeling of cool sheets against your skin, the imaginary weight of a blanket woven from trust itself. The people of Eyrem would tell you that sleep is always there, waiting, like deep, still water beneath the ripples of our thoughts. Our task is not to create water, but to become calm enough to settle in it. Let the ripples of the day subside, one by one, until only our own reflection remains in the perfect, dark mirror of peace. Feel the somnambulist around you now. Its engines are idling. Only the serene, star-studded blackness is visible from the porthole. The journey to Eyrem is over. There's nowhere else to go tonight. All missions are completed. All data is recorded. The only remaining task is the most ancient one, to allow. So let's do our last checks. Release the tension in your jaw. Let him go. Let your shoulders drop as if they are being gently pulled down by the gravity of a small, peaceful planet. Feel your spine lengthen, relying on the support below you, ceasing to hold you. Imagine that you have a heavy wool blanket draped over you from feet to chin. Not binding, but grounding. A gentle, welcome pressure that says, "You can stop holding on. I'm here." Now focus your attention on the very center of your chest. Imagine one colorless grain of lentil resting there. This is the last thought of the day. Watch her. You don't need to sort or solve it. Just acknowledge her presence. Now imagine that it gets easier and easier until it gets no harder than breathing. And with your next soft exhale, let her float away into the warm darkness, dissolving like a grain of sugar in water. The lights on the bridge of the Somnambula are dimmed to a soft, deep blue. The navigation console is disabled. The star charts fold into themselves. My voice becomes the distant, fading hum of the ship's core, a vibration that you feel more than you hear. We are entering a quiet harbor. The anchor descends soundlessly. The water here is still and deep. There will be no more stories to follow tonight. There will be no more lessons to learn. Just this, a slight rocking of the ship, the vast, welcoming silence of space, and the endless peace that exists between one breath and the next, between a thought and a dream. Release the steering wheel now. The ship knows the way. He drifts into the gentle current of deep sleep. There will be no more stops tonight. Good night. We will sail again soon.
you.